Oh my goodness. Hey everybody.
Hello.
What's up,
Yo!
everybody? How are you? Welcome to
Nice to see
Crossing the
you.
Streams.
Fantastic.
Crossing the Streams, where we answer the universal question.
What?
What should I be watching next? I just watched something and now I got to watch something else. We've come to the right place. This is episode 86
Because
Crossing the
reading and
Streams.
talking to my spouse are not options.
No. The we have over 85 hours. This will be the 86 hours streaming on our YouTube channel. Link in the comments with this post that you have, or search out Classic Conversations Jeff Jawaskin on YouTube. Follow along. You can go live there or on YouTube, or we're on the Twitter. I like saying the Twitter. Anyway, 85 hours of streaming suggestions.
The Ocho Cinco of streaming.
Yes, we are fully endorsed by Lance Armstrong. No doubts about that. So we've got a great our guest Mark will join another week. Unfortunately, some technical issues, but we got this crew here with us. It's a special
We're ready.
show.
We
got a
are.
special, but let's do the theme song real quick. Let's kick it off with Howard.
Here's the story of some lonely fellows who spend way too much time watching the TV. All of them have jobs and friends. Well, not really, just between you and me.
Bob.
They made a live show out of their hobby. Every TV watcher's TV watching dream. Jeff, Ron, Sal, and Bob, and there's Howard. They call it Crossing Streams.
Ron.
And then one day they went live on all the platforms. You could hear the people laugh and shout and scream. Still can't find another word that rhymes with platform. But man, we cross those streams. Here we go.
We cross
We
the
cross the
streams.
streams.
We cross the streams. That's how we do it.
That's the way we do it. Here we cross the streams.
Yay.
All right.
Right. That is awesome. So, any random things to talk about? We got a special show for everyone today. We got now that I think about it, we got a full Game of Thrones. Look at that. I even put in extra graphics.
Wow,
Look at that.
very nice.
Talking all Game of Thrones and House of Dragon. So we've never actually talked about it. Ron's obsessed. We've all seen it. Obsessed at different levels. So we're going to cover some of that, or all of that, and we're going to do that. So that was cool. Last week we talked about Only Murders in the Building, kind of a recap with season 2 ending. We re-talked about Ozark just because I had finally seen it and Ron was so obsessed, so I wanted to chat about it. Operation Mincemeat, which just took the internet by storm. Homecoming, the Julia Roberts show you've never heard of, and The Boys. We did another recap of The Boys with Mike White, covering seasons 1, 2, and 3.
So randomly, so some of you folks who are watching know I spent 9 days in India the week before last, and here's what I've learned. Perfectly okay to stream Netflix and Amazon Prime from Mumbai or other parts of the Indian subcontinent. But if you're a YouTube TV subscriber, you're out of luck, my friend. You will not get access to your local channels or any of the stuff that you were counting on when you got to India.
The only way to do it, so I had to do this when I was in London, was there are VPNs that you can get that mirror that you're actually in Kansas or Michigan or wherever.
Yes, I read about that.
Because I was able to use that to at the time I had DirecTV and the NFL Sunday Ticket, and I was able to stream that on my laptop in London.
It didn't matter. It wasn't that big a deal.
Yeah.
If you honestly at this point, if you have Netflix when you're traveling, you're pretty much good to go. You can always find something on Netflix. But I will just tell you that speaking just for India, they have outright banned VPNs, and you cannot get access to a VPN in India. So for those of you folks traveling to India, planning on checking out Crossing the Streams about what to watch while you're in India, Be careful. You cannot.
By the way, Ron, 9 Days in India, also a Julia Roberts directive video. I don't know if you knew that.
I was not aware of that. That's
Hey,
it.
Ron,
Yes.
Ron, I thought when you're in different countries have different rights. So if you log into Netflix in India, you're logging into USA Netflix. You're not logging in.
It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that I logged in with my credentials in India and seemed to have my exact American interface in front of me. But your point's well taken, because I didn't go through enough. They may have, there may be titles that are pulled out of India. And so I don't know the answer to that.
No movies about cows.
No movies about cows, but I can tell you what is about cows: the freaking interstates in India. They literally walk across the interstate, and you have to stop on the freaking interstates.
Really? Okay, I thought that was a myth.
No,
They also have
no.
really good Indian
Myth.
food there.
It's a myth.
It's a hit and myth.
They have
That's
great
very
Indian
funny.
food, or as they call it, food.
Food.
Yes.
Bunch. Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
Hey, I have a couple of random things related to trailers that I've seen in the past week.
Sure.
The Fletch trailer with John Hamm. I don't know if everybody got a chance to see
I saw
that.
it. It looks pretty
I
good.
saw it.
I think it looks fantastic. I love that John Slattery is playing Frank, his boss. That's amazing.
Yep.
And I thought it looked great. It's a little more true to the books, I think, probably, which were, mystery novels, really, with a bunch of humor. But I think it looks great. Did you guys get a chance to see it?
I think we all saw it, didn't we?
Yes. The
Fletch 1 is one of my favorite movies of all time, right?
yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
movie.
And Fletch Lives, not as good, but not bad, but not as good. But I think without any expectations, watching John Hamm, it was perfect, because it wasn't an impression. It
Right.
wasn't trying to do Chevy Chase, and it just worked. I just like, I can get behind this.
Yeah. Well, I love John. Like, this is going to sound crazy, but when I heard that John Hamm was doing it, I'm like, I don't know. But I mean, first of all, John Hamm doing the bits that he does of pure comedy, like his character in Bridesmaids is amazing. Even the stupid Geico commercials with Flo, he's just funny. He's got the great combination of the voice and the physical. So I'm like, maybe he will be good. And then I saw the trailer.
Funny
I'm like,
dude.
he's good. He is.
So
He's had a lot of funny. He was great in Kimmy Schmidt, and
That's right. I forgot about that.
Now, doesn't it seem though it's taken a long time for him to make that leap to leading man? Like, he's been in all these peripheral things, and he's good in all of them, but he hasn't hit it. It's like what was like watching Tom Selleck in the '90s try to become a movie star, and it just didn't happen.
It's interesting, and I was talking about this. I think one of the changes with it, like it used to be, you'd be big in TV, big in movies, and then
it was one of the other.
It would translate over, but I really think that the era of streaming, especially, has kind of changed it, because it's one and the same. It really isn't. Like you're like, well, it's easier to become typecast because they're not seeing you once a week. They're seeing you constantly as that character, and over again as that character. So I think that's changed a little. The other trailer that I don't know if you saw, and I'm almost ashamed to say this, but I don't know if you saw this. Winnie the Pooh officially has become public domain.
Yes.
It's lost its copyrights.
That's
so
right.
Knowing that, some idiots made a Winnie the Pooh horror movie.
I saw that today.
Pooh and Piglet are slashers.
I've got to see that.
They've killed everybody else.
Is it on YouTube? Where is that?
I saw it. It was a news story that had the trailer embedded.
It's on YouTube.
In it. Yeah, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube.
I'll check it out.
It's really just a stupid low-budget slasher movie where they're wearing cheap-ass Pooh and Piglet masks.
Yeah, Piglet is more like a hog. He's got tusks this time, right?
Yeah, well, they got to rough him up.
Yeah, it's pretty funny though.
So I got a couple.
Go ahead.
So not to just to kind of say, Howard has talked about this show in the past, and we both love it. And Never Have I Ever is in season 3. I'm about 3 or 4 episodes in, and man, it has not missed a beat. I feel like it's just as good, if not, just as good as a show as it ever was. It just keeps going. It's such a solid show, and it's funny because it's a teenage drama, comedy, and I bumped in my aunt and uncle, and we were talking. They're obviously much older than me, and they're like, "Oh, we love that show." It just resonates with whoever watches it. I think because it's very specific Indian culture, so I think it's interesting on other levels as well, because they do that so well and represent it so well. From what
it's Mindy Kaling, and it's the same thing with another show her other show that I talked about, Sex Lives of College Girls. That really had nothing to do with the sex lives of college girls. It was just same thing. It's the same kind of storylines, just set in college, not in high school. And I loved that too. It's the same type of banter. She just writes that stuff really well.
So we're not going to cover this in this episode either, but She-Hulk is a couple episodes in. So I don't think I love it as much as you do, and we
love it.
I enjoy it. It's Robin can't stand it because it's got no value, and it seems like if you watch the TV, if you read articles on it, the value of it is.
But Sex in the City, which she loved, has tremendous.
Well, I mean, you got to keep in mind this is the 5,000th Marvel thing, right? So I mean, it's the thing that gets the most press for She-Hulk is they mentioned a guy that fought with metal fangs or whatever. They just introduced Wolverine. It's like the most. It seems, and then him going off to space. It's like, it's World War Hulk. I mean, it's only like exists to set up other things.
But do that. I think they do that to rattle the cage of the serious geeks. In my opinion, other than WandaVision, even including WandaVision, it's the most entertaining Marvel anything since Endgame.
I'm entertained by. I think She-Hulk's a good character. I enjoy her, the actress, but it's just bubblegum. It's like I need a show that actually WandaVision at least had its own vision and had its own thing. This show doesn't seem to exist other than to exist so far.
Yeah, I mean they're quicker episodes too.
The last one was like 5 minutes.
I know, it's like 20 minutes. Yeah, it's a sitcom. It's not. I mean, it's really designed that way. I like that they brought elements of kind of the Deadpool Peacemaker, fourth wall. Funny.
Well, they invented that. That's a She-Hulk thing, actually.
Yeah. So it's good. I think she's extremely well cast, and I think we just really like it. It's entertaining and really enjoy it so far.
Ron?
I have literally nothing to say to this. I was actually typing a comment about how I like the part when they overproduce a meaningless mono-layered character and surround it with crap. I was going to say one more thing about Chevy Chase reboots like Fletch. I was going to make a comment that am I the only one in Crossing the Streams that thought the reboot of Vacation with Ed Helms was one of the funniest reboots like ever made?
It was funny.
I haven't seen it. Wait, we got our guest here. Our guest, Mark.
What?
Figured it out. He technically figured it out. 14 minutes in, swooped in. We stalled long enough. We haven't even started talking about Game of Thrones yet.
And he's on the air. Look at that.
And he's got. I don't mess around. I only invite people who have mics. And I was talking to Mark the other day, and I pointed that out, and then I have one, but it's over there because I don't have anywhere to hang it behind me. Mark, welcome. Tell everyone who you are, what you do.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here. Better late than never. And basically I run a podcast agency. I help busy professionals get status and sales through podcasting, and it's pretty fun. I also love TV and movies and books and all that good stuff.
You better like Game of Thrones.
Dun, 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 dun. I was told I needed to do the theme music.
Yeah.
So.
That was kind of cool that they waited for the second episode of this new series to play the Game of Thrones music. You know,
Well,
that was like, okay.
Well, let's do it. Let's start talking about Game of Thrones. We're going to talk about Game of Thrones, the complete series, and then we're going to talk about House of Dragon as well, which is only in the second. We'll be respectful of the fact that everyone may not have seen all of it, but or at least the second episode maybe. So Ron, you want to take us?
Yeah. So listen, Game of Thrones is complete now with its 8-season run. Famously taking that 8th season and throwing 7 amazing seasons right down the trash. And completely taking all of us down the shitter with it as we watch this. We watch the characters who were so neatly, delicately built over season after season just turn into completely, just like mindless characters of what someone else thought they should be. Anyway, listen, Game of Thrones. I actually was one of the fools that attempted to read the books. Right, I went after 1,000 pages of the series before I gave up. And for me, being ADD as much as I am, I will just tell you, for those who haven't watched it, the first season can be difficult. It's the story of really 6 major families competing for their right to put their best onto the Iron Throne and control, the Westeros, which is the world that we live in Game of Thrones. And what's amazing about the writing and amazing about the plot is that the storylines, at least in the first season, particularly in the first, say, 4 to 6 episodes, literally have nothing to do with each other. And you find yourself asking yourself, how there's no fabric to this story. There's no, like, how are these ever gonna come together? But they do. And that's the amazing part of this, is that the writing is so good. And if you're willing to wait it out and get to know these characters and get to understand each of their particular role and how they compete for the Game of Thrones, it is the most artful, well-designed storyline, I think, in television history, with maybe Breaking Bad or Sopranos being the only other ones that might be able to compete with it.
Another show that destroyed itself with the final episode.
Well, final episode. So,
which one?
Sopranos. Yeah, Sopranos. Yeah,
that's a whole argument. For that show.
Right.
I don't totally agree with that.
The other thing about Game of Thrones is that it's the first of its kind that kind of broke through, I think the historical expectation of characters surviving through the length of the run. And Game of Thrones has become famous now for, executing its own characters, sometimes leading characters, for the sake of the storyline. And again, this is all part of the writing. People who've read the books understand the bigger picture of what's going on and why these characters need to go away. It's not random by any point, but if you didn't read the story, seeing some of these characters go away, particularly as violently as some of them do, or unexpectedly as some of them do, it really is shocking.
You're avoiding spoilers, and I think at this point we cannot worry about that.
Yeah, right. I am avoiding spoilers, but
let's give our guests a second, because I know it's hard sometimes just to kind of get in. Do you have an opening statement, Mark?
Well, I agree with what Ron said. I mean, to me, the most compelling part of Game of Thrones is this extremely brutal medieval universe where just, there's basically no police, there's no internet, there's no cameras. So, if you want, you take, and the strongest man wins. And it's so brutal. And the fact that any sword fight could lead to your favorite character just getting brutally killed, it creates a tension that you don't typically get on television shows. I love superhero shows, but listen, Superman's never going to die, right?
Right.
Superman's not going anywhere.
Or if he dies, he's going to come back somehow with some, from some part of the storyline.
So, hey, Ron, Ron,
Yeah,
I wanted to. I tried also to read, and I gave up reading completely after this. But the anything. But no, I tried to read that first book. I started reading that first book, I should say. And I will say, if you read that first book, it parallels, and you don't even realize how good the people who shot and made Game of Thrones did in terms of being true to that source material. And actually reading the book did add a lot. Like I remember when they got those cubs in the beginning. I don't remember them. You know, the wolves,
the dire wolves that had
dire
no impact whatsoever for the next 8 years. Jesus, I hate it.
But the way they were standing, which if you're just watching, you may not have meant anything. But then the book explains how they were standing was in a particular order to the hierarchy of their
And Bob, I disagree. The dire wolves were incredibly impactful. They not as fighting machines for the North, but they were omens not only for the the fact that dire wolves were born and cubs that existed south of the wall for the first time in history, but there was the exact number of wolves for the number of Stark children.
That is correct. Weren't they born to protect the Stark children, and they protect none of them?
Wow,
that's kind of my point. I kept thinking they were going to be these, shadowy kind of presences that came in when the Stark children needed them, and they didn't do shit.
Well, yeah.
I think they were more set up to be an omen rather than a fighting force. So one thing I just want to piggyback on what Mark said, because I think Mark brought up some good points, is that one other really interesting thing that Game of Thrones has become famous for is that to his point, you could die at any point from getting killed, but the women of Game of Thrones, it is a matriarchal society, even though you think of it as purely the men fighting for access to Game of Thrones, all of the major houses ultimately get led by women. And I think it's the first of its kind, at least for an action show, to behave like that. And I think that's really interesting, and I applaud the show writers for that.
That's good observation. I didn't see it that way initially, but you're right.
My frustration was when they started making this show and it starts to be a hit, and George R.R. Martin's just like, he doesn't have the rest of the source material, right? But let's be honest, he had 5 years. Let's just call it 3 or 4 years. Maybe, it's a production time, but he had years where he could have come out with another book and then bought himself more time while they made that season. So it was like, he just sat there. Even now we're 3 years out, 3-4 years out of Game of Thrones, and he still hasn't completed it. And he's still talking about it. So it's like, it's kind of his fault. I see it that way, at least, that it went off the rails. I mean, he could have finished it. He could have. He could have.
So they ran out in season 5. I happen to think season 6 and season 7 were excellent seasons of Game of Thrones. Season 6 in particular. 7, you were wondering you started getting nervous about the source material, and then 8, as we know, was the cluster. But listen, that's what's so exciting about House of the Dragon. I know we're not ready to talk about that yet, but that source material is all there, and it's the story is well conceived, and I think we're all excited to see how that plays out.
There's something interesting that happens too. We're talking about them basing these stories and these episodes off the book for the first 5-6 seasons, or 5.5 seasons, right? When you rewatch them, you'll notice that it's not just these major storylines are happening, but every scene, there's another story being told, whether it's, this is how I came from Bravos to here, this is what my father did, or it's story after story after story. And it's slower at first, to your point, Ron, like you have to be a little bit patient with it, but it's all stories. Then when you move into season 6, 7, and 8, it's all action. So you lose this, like, the story development, and as someone who's big into podcasting, I've learned to really appreciate how important storytelling is to sucking people into what you're doing.
It's true.
And if you rewatch it, you'll find that stories are very hard to come by. in the later seasons.
So
well, go ahead now.
no, I was going to say, so I wasn't an original watcher. I didn't want, like, I started watching. I've done this a couple of times, and I don't know why the hell I do it, but when a show becomes a cultural phenomenon, and I just Better Call Saul, I literally watched the last 3 episodes. I never watched another episode of the series, but just from a pop culture standpoint and knowing what everybody else is talking about, I get interested. So I did that with Game of Thrones, and then my wife went back and streamed the entire show. And I think one of the challenges I had, which I think is unique to streaming, is when you're trying to watch all of it at once, there's so many characters and references. I think it would have been significantly easier to watch it 1 episode a week and have the knowledge that you've gained, as opposed to going, wait, who are they talking about? What, where, when? Like, I struggle with that. The other thing, I know we've talked about this before, having with the ability on streaming, watching it with closed captions, which I prefer normally not to do, but for Game of Thrones,
we've talked about this,
significantly important.
So Howard, I think you bring up a really good point, because for those of us that are the true nerds for Game of Thrones and who are just so excited about Sunday nights now for House of the Dragon, one of the things that you don't get the benefit of streaming it all together like you are, is that the rest of us nerds are watching these YouTube reviews that point out every freaking detail and Easter egg that you've missed through these episodes. Like, as an example, Jeff, you brought up Bob, you brought up the opening credits in episode 2 of House of the Dragon, and like, I hadn't even realized that whole opening credit scene with the river of blood was, like, I don't know if you guys realize this, but that whole thing was very specifically representing the bloodline of the Targaryen family. Were you aware of that? Nope. And so next time you watch it, when they show it, the way it separates at various points and then goes into 2 or 3 lines, and then, well, it's the actual family tree of the Targaryens. Like little things like, how would you ever know that if you're streaming, one after another after another? So
I have a question for Howard. So Howard, you watched it after it was completed. Yeah. So how did you feel about episodes 6, 7, and 8? Or I'm sorry, seasons 6, 7, and 8, meaning like how it ended?
Yeah, I mean, I hated the ending. It was so ridiculous to me to build up characters. I totally agree with Ron. So like, and then just destroy them. So just the choices they make being, look, I know people would point out rage could have caused a change in character, but it didn't fit. Yeah, it did.
Are we talking about Daenerys Targaryen?
Yeah. It just was so dumb, and then even just like that episode, the bells, just to keep it good. Like, okay, you could even justify some of it, like destroying the Red Keep, or like you could understand some of it, but then to keep it going, just flying around, with dragon fire constantly for hours, like, all right, enough. We get it. You're mad. So yeah, it was
typical woman.
I know it was. Yeah,
she seems upset.
Won't let it go, will ya? It was just, it was like enough. Season 6 is incredible.
Episode 6.
I can't remember the episodes totally off the top of my head.
Season 6. Sorry.
Season 6. Yeah. Okay. Season 6 is great. 7, I like 7, especially the earlier parts of 7 were good. Season 6 is fantastic.
What's the season where we find out what Hodor means?
Hodor. That's season 6, I think, right?
Yeah, that was a really tough episode.
Yeah. Season 6 is Battle of the Bastards. Yeah. I mean, there's so many good, some of the really good moments, especially in season 6. The who's the Mormont, the young girl. No,
Oh,
not Jorah.
you're talking about House Mormont,
Yeah.
Lady Lyanna Mormont.
Yeah, when she gives the speech
Yeah.
after Battle of the Bastards,
Sure.
you know, that speech is a classic, and so
Yeah.
that's a great moment. You know, like season 7 was good. You know, in building up a lot of the stuff leading to 8, I thought,
Yeah.
and there's some great episodes. Seasons 4 and 5 were tougher. Watching them streaming, I thought, than they would have been live, because like the Arya story with the Faceless Men and her training and all that stuff just really ran together. I think it would have been much easier to watch it one episode at a time than you're like, just, okay, could she just do something else? It got a little draining in some of those early episodes of seasons 4 and 5. And then when you get to 6 and 7, I thought it really picked up. So,
you know, it's interesting. I would never have guessed this had you just asked me, but so it ran from 2011 to 2019. There's only 62 episodes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's not a lot of episodes.
You know what, Jeff? You know what I find interesting, and this is true about a few shows, but Game of Thrones too. Like, I find it is such a wide cast. You know, there are so many people that are in front of that camera, and they kept them all together with one notable exception of Dario Naharis. But you know, the fact that over 8 seasons, to have an 8-season run with all your characters, not just the main ones, but the middling and low level ones all stayed together, that's a pretty incredible thing. I never can understand how shows can manage to do that for as long as they do.
Because they kill off the people that get canceled, I guess, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe.
Joffrey, we're done with you, or you know. But you know, another thing that I think is, and by the way, I don't think the ending was as bad as people give it. I think I get it. It's kind of obvious with you're getting angry, but there's this final scene where they're all standing around the ruins. They have like their final council and trying to figure out who's going to be like the new king. And you know, when they assign the new king, I'm like, wow, that makes sense. And I thought that was an interesting way to end it. Although again, the final season, everything seemed kind of obvious, which was.
Yeah, the last moments, I agree with you. I think the last moments of the final episode, you know, when Jon returns to the wall. Sorry, spoiler alert. And the dire wolf, you know, that was a great touching scene
with one ear.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. You know, Ron, it's funny you mentioned YouTube. I've actually watched YouTube a bunch for Game of Thrones. I might have talked about this before, but there's a whole series. I don't even know where it is, but it's called the Burlington Bar. And they would do public viewings at this packed bar.
Right. People's reactions.
People's reaction to all the great scenes, like the famous Littlefinger scene in season 7. And that's a great, cool way to go back and watch great moments from the show, is to watch them with people reacting the way that a whole group of people reacting the way that most of us did. When we saw them in the first time. It's really cool.
That is fun. They're the reaction videos. I did Game of Thrones pioneer the concept of reaction videos. I don't know if they did or didn't, but it seems like they have a lot of them.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of something else.
I also love
Two Girls, One Cup, I think.
I'm still reacting to that.
Yeah, we're all reacting from that. No, I was going to say that a lot of the characters go through such an evolution, such growth, that you find that that some of the ones perhaps you didn't really care for early on end up becoming your favorite characters. Sansa and Arya in particular, I think were really annoying as little kids in the early seasons, and turned into really, I think, interesting, particularly Arya, interesting characters. So
Sansa's become.
I think Jorah Mormont was one of my favorites, but I'd say the one thing that bothered me about Game of Thrones is it was never. I think they played with how big the 7 kingdoms were. Like 1 minute they'd be like Peter Tyrion would be like, here's a note, send it on the Crow. And then 5 seconds later, Bran's like, Peter Dinklage needs a drink. I mean, it's like, it was never clear, like, how far or long these things were taking.
So there's a famous argument about Game of Thrones. Mark, you probably know what I'm about to say. That the spider, what's his name? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Mark, help me.
I'm trying to think of his name earlier. Eunuch.
Yeah, the eunuch. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name?
Varys.
Varys. Thank you, Bob. There's a famous argument about how Varys was in Dorne, trying to pull Dorne into the party alongside of Daenerys and the other allies there. But then the very next scene.
Special effects. I brought special effects.
The dire wolf.
I thought it was your dog, Ron. Feed your dog, man.
It was a dragon. It's dragons.
Was that a dragon? The very next scene, he was in Dorne 1 second ago, and then the very next scene, he's on a ship with Daenerys crossing the narrow sea to come to Westeros, and everyone, all the reaction videos, like, what the hell? Like, is this like time travel? Like the
Starbucks cup.
Like, how the hell did he get all the way across the world in one scene? So it was. I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to change to another side topic, Bob. So finish.
Oh, I was just going to say a little known plot device. It's very well known with Game of Thrones, killing off characters just like this. First was Ned Stark, right?
Yeah.
They actually borrowed that technique from Police Squad, and became very popular.
Yeah.
I thought that was a bit of genius on their part.
All right, pivot, Mark. Pivot.
I feel like we're going to start to see that in more shows too, just to try to just randomly kill off people's favorite characters. It's such a bold move. But the other thing that I thought is very understated about the show. I mean, the politics, there's tons of politics, which are kind of understated. It's happening all the time, but you don't really think about it that way. But it's the religions and the impact that religions have on everything. It really comes to a head. And it starts in the very beginning where they're talking about, the red queen or the red witch, and then there's obviously the seven and how it completely overruns and the cult just completely overruns the city, the main city. I can't remember the name right now, but these religions are just, and what's interesting about the religions is they're all true. They're all real.
Yeah.
They're all filled with supernatural reality too, which is, I think, an interesting facet to the show.
You're talking about the high sparrow and that guy.
The old gods and the new.
Yeah, I never really thought about religion as part of the show either. It's obviously there the whole time. I was actually rewatching. So they were running. HBO would run day long. They'd run a whole season a day leading up to the new series. And I was looking back at some characters on like the Game of Thrones wiki. There's a whole and every one of the characters, it like lists different stuff about where they were born and all that, and it listed what religion they were. And I'm like, God, I guess I didn't really think about that much in terms of some of these characters. But you're right; it's there for a lot of them.
Right. The Hound was Orthodox Jew.
Little known fact.
Is that true?
Fact. No,
he had the beard.
That's you got me on that one.
You know who else was great? I think Gwendolyn
Lady of Tar.
Yeah, she was great.
Lady
but Jamie, the guy, Jamie Lannister, whose name I can't remember, Nikolai
Coster-Waldau.
Yeah,
whatever. He was. I loved his character too. Jon Snow was my favorite, though. I think Jon Snow. I wanted him to take over the throne. Since they went out of their way to. That was the other thing too, right? Samwell, right? All of the books. I just happened to open to the page that talked about these two people doing it, and it was Jon Snow.
He didn't find it. It was Gilly that found it.
That's right. It was
I mean,
Gilly.
but it was like by accident. It was like,
Yeah.
It was like, there's only 10,000 books, but we
Gilly
opened to the one that matters.
Gilly who can barely read.
But-
Gilly, who they dressed down. I thought she was going to have her never been kissed moment, when they're going to tart her up and all, because she's a gorgeous,
I don't know
girl.
that I've ever seen her anywhere but the show.
Yeah.
That up.
So
You
John,
know what else I like? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, Jon Snow is generally the fan favorite. I'm just curious which character y'all really love. For me, Tywin Lannister is to me one of the most interesting, compelling. He's so powerful, so strong. He puts it all on the line, unemotional, egomaniac for sure. But I really enjoy the Tywin Lannister storyline, and the way he dies is like so fitting. Just
Yeah.
You would expect him to be like eaten by a dragon, but nope, it's
Yeah.
Dies on the shitter.
Yeah. I agree with you. That actor whose name escapes me, Tywin Lannister, is just an incredible actor. Everything he does is amazing, including the old Eddie Murphy, the Golden Child. He's the bad guy in the Golden Child.
Oh my God! I didn't even put that together.
Charles Dance.
Yeah,
I
Charles
never
Dance.
put.
Yeah.
He's brother Sardar Numspa.
But here's the brilliance of Game of Thrones, by the way. We talked about people dying all the time, right? And where you can see the importance of really strong characters in every season, liking new characters, right? You can all of a sudden later you're like, oh, Jaime Lannister. I'm really digging Jaime, right? Like think about Walking Dead for half a second is they kill people all the time too. But the problem was they killed all the interesting people and didn't have anyone interesting to really fill it up, right? They never filled up that pot, which is why I think half the people bailed at half, the time and all that kind of stuff, because you don't care about the characters anymore. But Game of Thrones, they could kill a Ned Stark. They still had 10 characters that each one of us probably like 3 of them more than the others. But we all liked a ton of characters. And so it would carry you and keep you going, because ultimately you have to care about the characters in the show. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that device worked really well with Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I was fascinated by the casting because I remember the first couple episodes thinking, where did they get these people? What was that casting call? Like for Arya, we need a moon-faced little urchin who literally looks like she was born in the Middle Ages, right? And Caitlin Stark looked like she was, could have been, she was a painting from, the 1300s. They really found the facial features to match the implied time, and they did it again with this. What's her
House of the Dragon?
Yeah, what's the lead character's name? Venera. What's her name?
Viserys. You're talking about the king?
No, about the girl.
Yeah,
Rhaenyra.
Oh, Venera. Yeah, the most unfortunately named actress maybe of all time, Millie Alcock. But she looks she's got that look too,
Yeah.
Here's an interesting trivia for you, Bob. The original Game of Thrones pilot was shot and thrown out as garbage, literal garbage.
That's true.
Some of the characters, like Mrs. Stark, Emilia Clarke, was not in it. It was a different actress, so they recast, they reshot the pilot. I think there was another prequel for Game of Thrones where they ended up tossing the whole thing too.
George R.R. Martin talks about it, that there were multiple prequels and he pushed hard for this story about the Targaryens in the House of the Dragon, but they shot multiple pilots and had to finally this was the last one.
Let's talk a little bit about House of Dragon.
Wait. I want to go back and answer Mark's question.
Oh, sorry.
I have an answer for Mark's question too.
Okay,
so
then we're gonna spoiler. Then we're gonna.
Yeah. I kind of have 3 characters I really, really enjoy. I loved Sir Davos. I thought he was a great character.
Yeah.
Euron Greyjoy, I thought, just a character that just everything he went through, and then to come back the way that he did. And look, I mean, Tyrion Lannister is just Peter Dinklage was just so good. That character had just such an unbelievable amount of depth to it. It was hard not to. I wouldn't say I rooted for the character, but just he's so good. I mean, he chewed scenery with dialogue, which is not always the easiest thing to do, you know, without being flamboyantly over the top, a la Pacino, Scent of a Woman, you know, yelling.
I think that's why he's the one that kept winning the awards.
So for me, just real quickly, my favorite character who they killed off suddenly was Prince Oberyn of Dorne.
Oh yeah,
and he was fantastic. And I would go on record to say he might have the best death in TV history.
That was great.
It's up there.
Right, it's up there. One other thing, and I'll just say quickly, is that
he's the Mandalorian now, isn't he?
Well, he's also in Narcos Mexico and the whole Narcos franchise.
Oh,
the Nicolas Cage
Yeah,
movie.
The mountain kills him or whatever, right? Not
the mountain kills him. No, but what I was going to say is that if you go on YouTube, Grandmeister Pycelle, who everyone hates, the stuttering prick him, but there's a scene. If you go on YouTube, you can find this. They cut out a really important scene between him and Tywin Lannister, where Tywin Lannister basically calls him out and says, this whole stuttering old person hunched over, when is everyone else going to realize it's all an act? and like in the middle of the scene, Grandmeister Pycelle, who's all hunched over and stuttering on, like comes up and speaks normally like a normal person.
Wow.
To him and says, I didn't think anyone really knew. But so I feel like that would have changed his whole, like if we'd seen that in the show, I think we would have had a better sense of him rather than just being a stuttering idiot at the small council.
There was a small clip during the show where he was with like a prostitute or something.
Yeah.
You know, but interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, so we should move on to House of the Dragon while we have a couple minutes, right, Jeff?
Yeah, let's do House of Dragon. So I've seen the first episode. I haven't seen the second one, but I enjoyed it. It takes place 162 years before.
Yeah, before Daenerys is even born. So what I find interesting right off the bat from House of the Dragon is that it's a complete contrast to Game of Thrones in the sense that instead of having 6 or 7 wide-ranging story arcs about all these different families and their individual stories positioning towards the Game of Thrones, this is only about the Targaryen dynasty, a single family. And they talk about it in the very opening segment that the only way the Targaryens will ever be defeated is by Targaryens, by themselves, because no other family can challenge them when they have 10 dragons that are capable of wreaking havoc over the world. So right off the bat, they tell you this is not a story about multiple families competing for the throne. This is about how the Targaryens ultimately destroy themselves. And I think that's a super fascinating contrast to Game of Thrones. It's a very thin, storyline that I'm really excited. I'm through 2 episodes now, and I'm sold, man. I can't, because you can see now the factions. The factions are being created. Now where the fight is at least going to begin. Who knows where it's. All I know is that they have 10 dragons. And we all know they end up with none. So
right. Yeah, that's a good point. How does that happen? Like the dire wolves.
Right. Somewhere along the line, we're going to lose 10 dragons in this story, and I can't wait to find out how this happens.
Well, okay. Yeah, I got my wife to watch this with me. She never watched Game of Thrones, and she was hooked into the first episode too. So Robin's all in. So that's why I haven't watched the second episode. If I didn't, now I have that baggage.
Yeah.
So
but again,
they
stuck with the maternal thing. Queen Princess Rhaenyra is set up to be the heir, and now her best friend, I'm forgetting her name, is now going to be the wife of the king and bear his children. So it's super interesting. Once again, they're setting up the women to control the destiny of the throne, which I again find really, I think, brave.
And that girl is Hightower, right? Because there you can see that there are these houses are still, you're always jockeying for control. It's just that nobody can mess with the dragons,
right?
But they're like, all these dads are like, I want to get my kid in with the king. How can I get my kid in with the king? Right. So you got the high tower. It's high tower, right? Is the hand?
Yeah.
I don't even remember them being really mentioned in the new season of Game of Thrones, right? I mean, like they're there, but they're not.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'd never heard him mentioned either. But the other guy who's from Valyria,
Yeah.
I mean he's the one. He's more interesting. This guy, and now he's conspiring with Daemon, which is by the way, that they haven't talked about it, but the whole concept of the second sons, which they talk about in Game of Thrones. I'm assuming that this is the beginning of the second sons because both of them are second sons who are conspiring for the throne. So it's so well done, well written that already second episode in, you can see where the line is going. And I cannot wait for Sundays again.
I love the. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so these are based on books.
Yeah.
How many books are these based on?
These are the Dance of the Dragon. I don't know how many there are. I think is it 4?
So is this meant to just go as far as that? It's a complete story.
Yeah, this was the storyline before Game of Thrones. This is already fully written material.
Got it. Okay, so the friend in the first episode that the father tried to pimp off on the king ends up marrying the king.
Yeah, that's a terror. And then I saw the Valyrian daughter who's 12 years old was the one that they were positioning for to be the queen. And I saw a lot of media were very upset about that. Just the very suggestion that they would actually put that on television.
Why are they upset about that? This is what happened in the era in which they're trying to replicate. This happened all the time.
I get it. It's but I can tell you if you go Google 12-year-old queen in House of Dragons, you'll see.
Yeah, I did. I read a lot about it. It's pretty.
People are horrible online. They're just horrible. There's like this.
You noticed that?
Well, I mean, like it just usually if it's a minority actor or actress and they don't like it because they think it should be a white person, they just go nuts. It's like the worst. It's the worst. Like
really
Obi-Wan show had the same problem with its main star. People were just attacking her. All the other stars had to come out and do videos and say, "Back off, people." It's like.
Game of Thrones could it be more diverse? Maybe I don't know. I think there were a number of African American characters that, including not Melisandre, the Daenerys Missandei. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think already in House of the Dragon, I'm blanking on his name, but the Valyrian, I think he's extremely well cast. Perfect. It's
Lord Corlys.
Lord Corlys.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So I'm hopeful that they continue to. Who cares if they're casting well? It doesn't matter what race they are, So it's well done.
They were comparing today online the tragic event in 1 versus the Red Wedding. My wife asked me. She said, "Which one?"
I saw that too.
And I said, "It can't compare. The Red Wedding." I said, "Red Wedding 100 times over." I remember the Red Wedding. I don't know about you guys, but like I couldn't function the next day. Like literally couldn't function. And so the way I explained it to my wife was, I'm like, look, in the horrible tragedy that happens in episode 1 of House of the Dragons, it's telegraphed. I mean, they talk about it.
Yeah.
And then it happens. I mean, it's horrible to watch. It's a horrible, horrible event. But the Red Wedding was like all of a sudden you're at a wedding and the next thing you know there's a massacre of like multiple major characters.
So there was an air of menace in that whole episode. You knew some shit was going to go down, but you didn't know what form it was going to take.
And then when you, like Ron said, when you read all the shit about the Red Wedding after and go back and watch it again, like when you don't realize the first time that the song that the band is playing at the wedding changes and all that kind of stuff. And then now you watch it again, you're like, okay, you can see everything changing. Yeah.
I like the foreshadowing going on with the king, where the Iron Throne is literally killing him.
Yes, it's cutting him.
Cutting him. He's got a sore on his back from it. That's you know where that's going to go. But
for sure,
it's interesting the way set it up.
Viserys you're referring to reminds me a lot of Ned Stark from season 1 too. Good-hearted, wants to do the right thing, wants to help everyone, but kind of weak, kind of a pain, not willing, not
He's
able.
gonna die for it.
He's gonna die for it. How about this crab guy who kills people by tacking him to the beach and letting the crabs eating him?
Yeah,
that's I got to tell you, that's a pretty creative way to kill your enemies. I gotta give George Martin credit for that one.
what is he? The crab feeder? Crab feeder?
What is he? Yeah, crab feeder. Yeah, is that right?
Bob's had crabs many times and lived to tell about it.
I have last week, as a matter of fact.
Wow, and they, Game of Thrones. Do you remember that? I forget what it was, like second or third season, where they would put a rat in a bucket and tape it to your chest.
Yeah.
I mean, Game of Thrones comes up with pretty creative ways to kill people.
Well, that was an actual medieval torture, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, gosh, can you imagine?
We're despicable creatures.
The
Horrible.
creativity.
Yeah, that really hasn't changed in all these years.
Hasn't changed.
All right, so House of Dragon is 10 episodes. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Well, that's what's so compelling about the show too. I mean, like, we like to look around and think about how great we are and how kind we are and how much better humanity is now. But the reality, we're still humans. We're still creatures.
Not so much,
We're selfish. We're full of ego. And if left to our own devices, this is the kind of stuff we've been doing. So it's kind of like almost like a mirror, that we look back on, which I think is.
I think you're exactly right, Mark. I think it's a brutal reflection of who we actually are, and I think quietly, maybe in the back of recesses of our mind, we all know that our species is fully capable of this exact thing again, right? So I
Don't
agree.
you feel disconnected from it though? I mean, can you really relate to a group of people doing anything to get power and being deceitful to get power? It just doesn't resonate with me. I can't see how it connects. I don't see.
You know
how
what,
it
Jeff?
connects.
I'm gonna get back to you on that on next January 6th.
Oh man! All right. Well, this was awesome. I think we may have convinced some people to watch Game of Thrones.
Listen, I think that I'm wondering how many Game of Thrones people are actually watching House of the Dragon. It might be all of them. I'm not sure.
Oh, Lee is back. Sorry,
Yeah,
Ron.
I haven't been good with keeping up. And then Sal said hi from 30,000 feet above.
Oh yeah, he's flying.
Yeah. So
Nice to hear from Lee
Is
himself.
is that code for Sal's getting drunk, drinking bourbon?
He's actually
somewhere in
right next to me,
Louisville?
and he's baked.
Sherry.
Mr. Chacon weighs in.
we could use a little.
We've been
melanin.
canceled. We've been canceled.
Bobby, we could use a little melanin on this show, wouldn't you think?
I think so.
Oh man! All right.
By the end of season 1, who's going to be sitting on the Iron Throne? Who do y'all, assuming you haven't read the books?
I have not. So I haven't read these books. So I don't. Are you asking us to each venture a guess?
Speculate a little bit.
Is it 10 episodes?
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure Viserys is going to die this season. Like, seems like he's not long for this world.
Yeah. I don't think. This is my personal opinion that I don't think we're going to finish the season with anybody on the Iron Throne. I think there's going to be an all-out war in Westeros fighting.
Well, I read. What did I read the other day? That in the next few episodes they're going to catapult 10 years ahead or 5 years. How many years?
The narrator was Rhaenyra as an adult.
Okay.
Right. So she's the actress who plays her. I think comes in episode. I think 4 or 5, right?
And and this young Rhaenyra is gone for
Is
good,
gone.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's gone. Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I don't know.
I don't know. They all say they are in 10 episodes, so it's confusing on IMDb. So maybe it's flashbacks and stuff like that.
Jerry says Damon's going to sit on the throne. That's a good guess. That's a good guess when you consider that Matt Smith was a good hire for this franchise coming right off the Crown. So
Yeah.
he's used to being sitting on the chair.
Right. I have to. I'll probably have a better answer for you, Mark, like in a couple episodes. But my guess would be it'd be like what Ron's saying, that it's going to pivot to the next season. It's going to be an all-out war or something like that.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's in a wheelchair yet, but
All right, Jerry, you're gone.
Damon's
All right. Hey, well, this was fun, guys. Thank you.
was
This
fun.
was
That was
a
fun.
good
we should
deep
do
dive.
we should do more shows like this where we focus on one franchise.
We should. I think we got a thing here now. Mark,
Thanks,
say
Rob.
good nights. You can remind everyone, your website, podcast, anything.
Yeah, you can find me everywhere. Mark Savant Media. I help busy professionals build sales and status with podcasts. That's it. Hit me up, Mark Savant Media.
Awesome.
Metaverse, too. We didn't even talk about metaverse, but don't get me started on the metaverse.
Bob the Slob.
All right, tomorrow night, Janetti's Hole in the Wall Theater with my show partner Sal D'Amelio. We're sold out, but you can hear about it the next day. Well, we got lions roaring or something.
Those are my dragon special effects.
Let's see what else. September 16th and 17th at the Ann Arbor Comedy Showcase for 3 shows, and BobPhillipsComedy.com.
All right,
I'll
Howard,
be
say good night.
I'll be here. Good night. Good evening.
Ron, say good night.
You'll see me Monday walking the Mackinac Bridge on Labor Day, so see me
All
there.
right.
Very nice.
Otherwise,
Very nice.
Wednesday nights.
Watch
Very
out for that
fun.
wind.
That sounds fun. You can catch my podcast, Classic Conversations.
You have a podcast?
I do. JeffIsFunny.com or classic-conversations.com. I got to tell you, I had Cato Kalin on from the O.J. Simpson last week, and then Tamer Katan, he's an international comedian, on this week, and he talks all about doing comedy in Afghanistan, but specifically the prep that they go through for being in a war zone. I'm not going to spoil any of it, but it's incredible. It's insane. Like the things that they put in, that they train them to do in case there's active shooters and stuff like that. It's like crazy.
Wow.
Well, I need to know. I didn't listen to the Cato Kalin episode yet. Did you ask him the question?
Of course I asked him. I said,
What did he say?
he thinks OJ did it for sure.
Okay.
course
All right.
OJ.
Oh no, I gave it away. Now you're not going to listen. Bye, everyone. And that has been another episode of Crossing the Streams. Join us every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live on Facebook and YouTube. Follow the Jeff DeWaskin Show on YouTube to be alerted every time we go live with your hosts, Jeff DeWaskin, Ron Lippett, Howard Rosner, Bob Phillips, Sal D'Amelio. We're all in the socials. Follow us, listen to our podcasts, Classic Conversations, and the Sal and Bob Show. Check them all out, and we'll see you next week and every week when we cross more streams right here. See you